as a United States attorney and working and the House, serving in the House, and now serving as governor. He has been used in a great way. But here's what the bottom line is. Governor DeSantis says what he's going to do, and then he does it. That's pretty clear. And that's what has happened in the state of Florida. And tonight we have the opportunity to hear the governor of Florida come and share with us what has happened in that state. His wonderful wife, Casey, is with him tonight. They have 3 wonderful children, and God is using her also in the state of Florida. So this is a time when we can hear from someone who is making a difference. And we are pleased to hear that today, and that it will be an encouragement to us. And we're grateful that he's here. And I want you to welcome the governor of Florida, Governor Ron.
Greetings from the free state of Florida. It is great to be with fellow patriots in South Carolina. My wife, who you all get to see in a minute, is going to come out. We're going to have a little chat, but I want to say a few things beforehand. You know, Florida, we're proud of what we've been able to accomplish. Florida shows that leadership really matters. Results matter. And I think if you look at our results, they are second to none. We are the fastest growing state in the United States. We're number 1 for net in-migration. You all have net in-migration too, because I've seen it. We're number 1 for economic freedom. We're number 1 for education freedom. We're number 1 for parental involvement in education. And we're number 1 for public higher education. Our tax burden is the 2nd lowest per capita in the country. We don't have an income tax. I suggest y'all give that a run sometime. You won't regret it. That's all I'm saying. We have the 2nd lowest per capita debt burden in the country, and our economy in Florida is over $1 trillion. Our debt's $20 billion. Compare that to the U.S., where the debt is greater than our entire American economy now by many trillions of dollars. Totally reckless. And Florida runs the largest budget surplus in the history of the state by a country mile. Now, none of that would have been possible had we not, when the world went crazy during COVID, when common sense suddenly became an uncommon virtue, we in Florida stood as a refuge of sanity, as a citadel of freedom for people in our state, throughout these United States, and even for people throughout the world. We refused to let our state descend into some type of Faucian dystopia. We were not going to let people's livelihoods be destroyed, their rights curtailed, opportunities for our kids disrupted. We proudly chose freedom over Fauciism, and we are better off for having done that. And here's why I think it's encouraging about what we were able to do in Florida, because when I became governor 2018, I got elected November 2018, I won by 32,000 votes out of over 8 million votes cast, less than 0.5%. And Florida, even though that was close, that was not out of the ordinary for Florida. If you go back the previous 10 years, you look at governor races, Senate, or presidential races, almost always 1-point margin, 2010 all the way through 2018. And so that was just the political reality of the state. It was viewed as very closely divided. And so people told me when I got elected in a very close race, listen, you get into that office, understand the state's got a very delicate political balance. Keep your head down, don't rock the boat. Don't do anything that's going to disrupt that. just kind of lay low for a while and kind of let things settle down in the aftermath of the election. And honestly, was not crazy advice, but it was advice that I rejected. My view was that I may have earned 50% of the vote, but winning the election entitled me to wield 100% of the executive power, and I intended to use the authority granted to me to advance a conservative agenda for the people of Florida. And the way you do that is to lead by conviction, not put your finger in the wind and try to figure out which way the wind's blowing. And so I said going into office, I am not going to look at any polls to tell me how to think on any particular issue. And I have not taken a poll to this day since I've been governor. A leader is not captive to polls. A leader sets out a vision, executes on that vision, delivers results, and guess what? When you do that, you build support for your policies. So don't be captive to polls, lead the polls, get out there and get it done, and that's what we did, and we wouldn't have been able to accomplish had we not done that. We also understood that, you get into office, and that's great, and you can have great ideas, you can make great decisions as an executive, but if you don't have a cadre of people working in your administration who believe in the mission, who are going to put the people's agenda ahead of their own personal agendas and are going to work tirelessly to implement our agenda, then it's not going to amount to very much. And so we made it very clear on day one, if you're bringing any other agenda to this administration other than what is in the best interest of Floridians and what we campaigned on during the campaign, if you're putting your own agenda in that mix, then pack your bags right now. There is the door. We don't have time for this. We've got a job that we've got to get done. And we've been able to execute day after day with very little behind-the-scenes fanfare or leaking or palace intrigue, because ultimately all that does is distract from your ability to get to true north. And then we also understood, look, I didn't want to be one of these Republicans that get into office and they're almost like potted plants. They don't do anything, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, well, listen, you understand why that is, because anytime you make a decision as a leader, some people are going to like it, and some people aren't going to like it. That's just the nature of the job, and if you don't ever want to tick anybody off, if you don't make any big decisions, well, you may tick fewer people off, that's true, but you're not actually accomplishing anything. So I said, I'm not going to sit back and try to skirt issues. I'm going on offense. I'm going to take the bull by the horns. I'm going to go in there, and we're not going to leave anything left to chance. I sat at the desk the first day I was governor. I looked around the room in the state capitol, and I said, I don't know who is going to succeed me in this office, but I do know they are not going to have very much to do, because I'm getting all the meat off the bone, and I'm not leaving anything behind. And so going on offense allows you to set the agenda. Don't let the media set the agenda. Don't let the left set the agenda. We set the agenda. And finally, I went in with the mindset that when you're in an executive position like governor, it's not necessarily the same as other political offices. I mean, you get in there and you can have good policies, you can have good ideas, but really, I think the key ingredient is leadership. You've got to be able to exercise leadership. And to me, leadership is being able to make the tough decisions when those decisions are in the face of intense criticism, public opposition, media opposition, partisan opposition. You got to have the fortitude in your decisions to be willing to stand all by yourself if that's what it takes. And so for us, that came when COVID hit. And, I didn't know very much about what was going on in terms of what this virus represented, but we looked at a lot of data, we did our own research, and we soon concluded that we could not Fauci the state of Florida. We had to go our own way. And when we did that and made those decisions, it was incredibly unpopular to do that. It was unpopular with certainly the elites. It was unpopular with the bureaucrats. It was unpopular with the media, the left, and even some Republicans were going after me. And so I put myself in a position where I was kind of out on a ledge. I was kind of standing all alone. And a lot of my friends and supporters were like, you got to recalculate what you're doing here. They are killing you. You are not going to be long for this world politically if things keep going in this trajectory, because it's just not working out for you. And you know, the problem with that is the leader has got to be more concerned with protecting the jobs of the people he represents than in protecting his own job. And all I wanted to do is do everything I could to stand up for the folks when no one else was willing to do it, and be able to just look in the mirror knowing that I made the decisions that in my gut and in my heart I thought were the right decisions. And you know, the political chips, how those fall, who knew what was going to happen at that time? Nobody knew what was going to happen at that time. But I was willing to deal with those consequences however they were. But I never would have been able to live with myself if I looked in the mirror knowing that I didn't do what I thought I was right, because I was worried about some short-term political benefit from that. And so we stood strong, we did what was right, and fast forward a couple years later, November of 2022, people had written me off in the summer of 2020 with COVID. We come back after 4 years, we stand for re-election. We had won 4 years previously by 32,000 votes, less than 1%, as I mentioned. This re-election, we won by over 1.5 million votes. We were fortunate enough to earn the highest percentage of the vote that any Republican governor candidate ever received in the history of the state of Florida. We were able to win 62% of Hispanics. We were able to win independents by 18%. We were able to flip traditionally blue urban counties like Miami-Dade, which went to Hillary Clinton by 30% in 2016. We not only won Miami-Dade and painted it red, we did so by double digits. Nobody thought that was possible. But it's not just about me as I was the top of the ticket. That's important. But my view is I'm leading a team of people that are running on our Republican ticket, and I needed to make sure the legislature did well, the school board races, up and down, and we were able to do that. We earned super majorities in the Florida legislature, biggest majorities we've ever had in Florida history. We got involved in 34 school board races. We were able to elect 29 conservative members to school boards throughout Florida, and that's changing things in great ways. We now have, in the state of Florida, for the first time since the aftermath of the Civil War, there is not a single solitary Democrat elected to statewide office in the third largest state in the country. That's a big deal. And how do you know that this is a big wipeout? Well, here's a headline that was in one of the corporate media publications in the aftermath of the election. Quote, "There's no plan, there's nothing. Florida Democrats in despair over the future." That's what you call winning when you do that to your opposition. But what I think it's shown, to take a state that was a swing state, you move it in a red direction like that by major margins, what it shows you is that conservative policies are what the average person wants to see, not just in Florida and South Carolina, but I think all across these United States. Just look at how Florida handles its economy compared to our competitors. Our state has millions of more people than New York State does now, yet New York's budget is twice the size of the budget of the state of Florida. And yet we have better roads, better services, higher performing education. Where is all that money going that they're taxing people in New York? They're wasting a bunch of money, they're taxing people, and it doesn't work. Look at the federal government. and the massive debt that they're piling up. You know, Florida, our debt is one of the lowest in the country, and yet in this current year's budget, we're creating a debt repayment program to accelerate more repayment of our debt. So we're going to end up having the lowest per capita debt in the entire United States. And that's just a question of will and whether you want to do the right thing and whether you care more about future generations than you do about whatever may tickle your fancy in a given time right now. Washington is totally the opposite. You know, their view is the path of least resistance. Whatever they need to do so that they never have to pay the piper on anything is what they do. So they charge it to the credit card, they mount more on the debt, and now we're $31 trillion in debt. And when you spend the way they've spent, when the Fed prints money the way the Fed has printed money over these last few years, the only result you can have is an inflationary environment. And that inflation represents an invisible tax on every American. And who is that hurting the most? Not the wealthy. It's hurting working people, blue-collar folks who are seeing their savings diminished and their purchasing power diminished. And so DC and left-wing governments in the state level are doing it wrong. Florida knows how to handle the economy, and we're doing it right. And I can tell you, COVID represented an existential threat to our state because we have an elderly population and we have a lot of tourism, and there was possibility people wouldn't want to travel. Well, we made the decisions to make sure things were open and protect our elderly, and the result is we have never had a better economic performance in the state of Florida than we are having right now. And that's just about good leadership. We also are proud in Florida to stand unequivocally on the side of law and order. And that means supporting the people that wear the uniform, the men and women of law enforcement. That means rejecting policies like defunding the police, which we have rejected in Florida. It means standing strong against things like the BLM riots that we saw in 2020. It means rejecting soft on crime policies like eliminating cash bail and jailbreak legislation, which lets convicted criminals out of prison early before they've even finished their sentence, and many of them reoffend. And it also means standing up against these rogue prosecutors funded by people like George Soros They want to use the law as a political weapon to advance their ideological agenda. So laws that they don't like, they don't enforce. What ends up happening, these societies crumble, public safety crumbles, people flee these areas, and I made it clear in Florida, we're not tolerating that. When we had a prosecutor that was backed by Soros in Tampa who said he was not going to enforce laws in Florida he didn't like, I removed him from his post. He's gone. We are also leading the way and ensuring that our school system is about educating our kids, not about indoctrinating our kids with leftist ideology. These are K-12 and public higher education. These are institutions funded by our tax dollars. They don't have a right to pursue a partisan left agenda. They need to pursue an agenda that's in the best interest of the public and that is serving state policies. And so we've made sure to reorient our systems in Florida in line of the traditional mission of education. We support the rights of parents to be involved in the education and upbringing of their kids. We have eliminated toxic ideologies like critical race theory in our K through 12 schools. We're not teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other with your tax dollars, not on my watch. And as important it is to speak out against things like CRT, we also got to say what we're for. So in Florida, we have placed a renewed emphasis on American civics and on teaching kids what it means to be an American, having them understand the Constitution of our country and the founding principles, and we're even providing great training for teachers so that they understand and can get education on that as well. And we are the only state in the country that sets aside one day every school year to teach our students about the victims of communist regimes throughout history. We're telling the truth about Marxism and Leninism in the state of Florida. And I'm going to call my wife out here in a few minutes, but when I look at education issues, I look at it through the lens of a governor, but I also look at it through the lens of a dad, of a 6, a 4, and a 3-year-old. And my wife and I both believe it's important that in Florida and really throughout our country, parents should be able to send their kids to elementary school, kids should be able to watch cartoons, kids should just be able to be kids without having somebody's agenda shoved down their throat. It is wrong to tell a second grader that they were born in the wrong body. It is wrong to teach kids they can change their gender. And in Florida, we've made sure that gender ideology has no place in our K through 12 schools. Teach kids about math, teach them about English, teach them about the basics. Don't teach them about things that are not true and that could be very, very harmful for them. And not a lot of people, well, a lot of people like that. Not everybody liked that. The left didn't like that when we did it. The corporate press didn't like it when we did it. And Disney didn't like it when we did it. But you know, they may have run Florida for 50 years before I got on the scene, but they don't run Florida anymore. We'll do what's right. And then finally, we're making sure our higher education system is reflecting the proper mission of higher ed. We are going to be the first state in the country within the next month or so to eliminate so-called DEI programs from all of our public universities. This is ideology. They are using this as a Trojan horse to impose ideology. They say it stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is not what they're using it for. You know, we believe it stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public universities, and we're doing something about it. We're also standing for the important principle that our nation's borders matter and the rule of law matters when it comes to immigration. Yeah, you've got millions of people pouring in. You have fentanyl coming in at record rates. You have record numbers of death now from fentanyl overdose. And these are, you know, in Florida, you know, you'll run into mothers that have lost children because of this scourge. And yet Biden's just letting it happen. He's not holding the cartels accountable. You have criminal aliens coming across the border. People on the terror watch list are coming across the border. And so in Florida, we've leaned in on this issue. We've banned sanctuary cities in our state. We're actively engaged. They say you're not a border state. Yeah, we're not on the southern border with Mexico. We're a maritime border state, and they try to run boats into the Florida Keys from places like Haiti. So the Coast Guard, it's their job to stop it. They actually do a good job. Biden doesn't give them enough resources. So you had boats coming through, landing in southern Florida. So I declared a state of emergency. I marshaled our marine assets in Florida. We filled all the gaps. And so working with the Coast Guard since August, we've been able to repatriate more than 11,000 illegal aliens back to Haiti, back to some of these other places. And even though we've seen the damage to the rule of law, even though we've seen the damage with the criminal aliens and the drugs and all that, you know, a lot of the media has not wanted to cover the border. They've not wanted to cover the problems that you see. The only time they really got worked up about it was when we had 50 show up in Martha's Vineyard. Then they got really upset about that. I believe that you can't secure the border just by putting a little bit more money into DHS, putting more Border Patrol agents. You need to construct a wall along the southern border. It works. It will work if you do it. So we need to get that done. And what I've told Joe Biden is, we had a major hurricane come through Florida in September, Hurricane Ian, almost a Category 5, did a lot of damage, but one of the things it did, it ripped out the bridge going from the mainland to Pine Island, and it severed the causeway going to Sanibel in 3 different places. And these were not state of Florida bridges or assets, they were local. Locals were telling the residents it's going to be 6 months before we're going to get this stuff up and running again. And so a lot of them came to me because their islands would have died. They said, Governor, can you help us? We can't wait 6 months. We need a solution. And so I said, all right, we'll take it over. I'll help it. So I got my guys together and I said, listen, no bureaucracy, no red tape, and no excuses. Just build it. And so we took over the job, and Pine Island Bridge, instead of taking 6 months, we were able to reconstruct the bridge in 3 days and open the island again. And then Sanibel 2 weeks later. Don't think they would have been able to do it that quick in California or New York, but I raised that just because, we've got some guys with know-how in Florida. I'm willing to send that team to the southern border to build that border wall. Come on, Joe, put us in. We'll get it done. And I think the other thing that I think people side with us on is people want an economy in which businesses and corporations are focusing on their core mission, to serve their customers, to produce product, to provide the services that they're supposed to do. They do not want to see corporations using basically shareholder assets if they're publicly traded, but even just otherwise using business assets to try to advance a woke agenda and impose that on society. And that's true whether it's this Bud Light, what they're trying to do. Whether it was what Disney was trying to do with the sexualization of the kids in school. And here's the thing, they want to impose an ideological agenda on our society. And to me, that if you want to change policy, the appropriate way to do that is to try to win elections and then implement your policy. But they know they can't win elections on these values, so they're basically trying to run an end run around that, and they're using the business community to try to impose changes to society, to culture, and even, in some respects, to laws. That is not going to be healthy for our society. It's not going to be good for our freedoms. And guess what? If Wall Street banks are pursuing a social agenda, are they going to ever go after any left-wing causes? No, they're going after gun owners, they're going after Christians, they're going to go after people who are dissenting from their woke orthodoxy. So it's a huge, huge problem, and I think this woke is really a mind virus. It infects these different institutions, it gets into politics, but it also gets into business, it gets into academia, it gets into the bureaucracy. It's really a form of cultural Marxism. It's trying to divide people based on identity politics. It is waging war on merit and on achievement, and it really is a war on the truth. Don't tell me that babies are born racist. Don't tell me that men can get pregnant. That is not true, and I am not going to accept that. So because the woke represents a war on truth, we have no other recourse but to wage a war on woke. We fight the woke in the schools. We fight the woke in the legislature. We fight the woke in the corporations. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die. Now, I think if you look going forward, President Reagan used to say freedom's one generation away from extinction. It's not passed along in the bloodstream. It needs to be protected and cultivated. And while I like the quote, I always used to think it was a little overblown. I used to think it was a little bit of hyperbole. because growing up, we were Americans. The freedom's in our DNA. It can't possibly be that fragile here in the United States. But I think anyone that's lived through the last 4 or 5 years should be disabused of the notion that our freedoms cannot be taken from us. It's fragile. It requires us to be engaged. And I believe if the left's able to run the table in 2024 with these elections, their agenda is going to be a radical agenda. They're going to try to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going to try to abolish the Electoral College. They're going to try to make Washington, D.C. a state. And they are going to try to impose ballot harvesting and eliminate voter identification nationwide, overriding state laws to the contrary. That's not an agenda that the average American family is talking about over their dinner table. They're talking about crime, education, inflation, all the important things. No, that's an agenda that is trying to render the conservative part of the country second-class citizens. They don't want us to have a voice in the affairs of this nation. And so I think freedom is on the line. The founding fathers understood this very well. When they went to Philadelphia to create the Constitution, they studied the history of every republic and the history of mankind because they wanted to draw lessons to how they could do the American experiment. And there was really only one thing that was common throughout every republic up to that point, and it was this. Every one of them had failed. And so they understood it fell to the United States of America to determine once and for all, could people really govern themselves? Could we have a society based on the idea that our rights come from God, not from the government? That we have a rule of law, not ruled by individual men? Or were we forever destined to live under various forms of tyranny? And they understood that this country would answer that question once and for all. They also knew you could have the best Constitution in the world, you could have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. It doesn't run on autopilot. That's why when Benjamin Franklin left the Constitutional Convention, he was asked on the street in Philadelphia, Dr. Franklin, what have you given us, a republic or a monarchy? Franklin's response was, a republic if you can keep it. He understood, and the founders understood, that you need to have citizens that are willing to go out and fight to preserve freedom. Sometimes that may mean, like I did and like some of you did, you may wear the uniform of your country and end up in places like Iraq. Sometimes it may just mean you're an engaged citizen, you're going to a school board meeting, holding them accountable to make sure our education is in line with what we expect. There's a variety of things you're called to do, but doing nothing is not an option at this point in our history. I believe that decline of our country is a choice that we will either make one way or another. I do believe Florida shows that success is attainable, and I know very well that freedom is worth fighting for. So I will stand firm, I will hold the line, and I will never, ever back down. Thank you all. I'm bringing out the First Lady of Florida. We're going to have a little chat, but God bless you all. We got a lot of work to do in the country. All right.
Back in South Carolina, I'm not going to lie, this was my stomping grounds back in the day. I graduated from the College of Charleston. When I looked at how long ago that was, I had to give myself a pause because I realized how old I was getting. But I just want to say, first of all, as you heard the better half talk about all the great things he's doing, being the dad and the mom of a 6, 5, and a 3-year-old, I'm just going to say this. It is so nice to come out here to talk to somebody older than 4. I'm not going to lie.
So we have a 6, a 5, and a 3-year-old at home now. We're actually going on a trade mission this weekend, and one of the places we're going to end up is Israel. And Casey and I, when I was a U.S. congressman, she came with me on a trip there. We've been a lot. If you all have never gone, I mean, it's unparalleled history, and it's really a spiritual experience. But when we went, we didn't have kids yet. Casey got like one of these bottles of water, went into the Sea of Galilee and filled it up with water from the Sea of Galilee because when we had children, we were gonna use that water to baptize our kids. And so a year or two later, we have our first child, Madison, daughter. We've got the bottle, do the baptism. Man, it's great. Then second child comes, Mason. March of 2018, I was running for governor. I was a sitting U.S. congressman. We did not have time to plan a baptism at that point. And so we said, let's just get through the election and then we'll figure it out. Well, we were fortunate enough to win the election. So we said, you know, for the governor inauguration, you're going to have a lot of our friends and family in town anyways. Why don't we just do it in Tallahassee? I'll give the inauguration speech. They want to do like a parade. I'm like, I don't like the pomp and circumstance anyways. Let's cancel the parade, come back to the governor's residence, and we'll do it there with the water. So we did it, baptized Mason, great. Now, we had just moved in there. We weren't used to people picking up after us. And so we went about our day. You had a bottle like this just kind of sitting there, half filled. And so, you know, the staff thought it was a bottle of water with no significance. And so next morning, I asked the First Lady, I said, you got the Sea of Galilee water? She's like, I think it's downstairs. I went, and there was nothing left. It was spick and span. So they threw it away, the rest. Now, a week or so later, I was out doing an event, and I said, just so everybody knows, we don't have a bun in the oven right now, but we are out of water from the Sea of Galilee. 24 hours later, there were people in Israel digging in the Sea of Galilee, and they sent me this beautiful glass jar with water from the Sea of Galilee. I put it on my desk in the Capitol, and then when our third Mamie was born in March of 2020, we had the water from the Sea of Galilee, and we got it done.
That's perfect.
So, Mamie's too young to go, but the two oldest are 6 and 5. They are going to be able to go to Israel, and like our son, what did he want for Christmas? What was his number one request? He wanted a slingshot to be like David fighting Goliath. So he knows all this. They both know all it. So it's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, it was, first of all, as a mom, you know, sometimes you think things through and you think, this sounds like a really great idea. Let's have a 6 and a 5-year-old go on a 15-hour flight. Like that, you know, and then as we get closer to the date, now listen, very blessed, this is one of those opportunities that if you have the chance to go to Israel or any of this, like you do it. But I'm just trying to plan this through because as we fly out there, we literally lose Sunday. So when you have kids on schedules, you're trying to think, if you lose an entire calendar day, what does that do to their schedule? So this also brings me to living in the governor's mansion, which is a really fantastic, honestly, very humbling experience. But it's like living a little bit like in a museum, right? Because it's like the MasterCard commercial. You look around and you have all of these artifacts from Florida. And so it's like this amount, if you break it, you buy it sort of thing. It's this many thousands of dollars and this is priceless. So we always go in there and we tell our kids, because we're really the first family in about 60 years to have young kids. First baby born in the governor's mansion in 60 years. So it's like, look with your eyes, don't touch with your hands, right? So one of the rooms...
They don't always listen to that, I can tell you.
But I'll tell you, if you look in the book, though, in the dedication, it's dedicated to Mason, Mamie, and Madison. And it says, always listen to your mother. And I show them that all the time. I said, you're not listening to me. See, your dad even put it in the front of the book. You have to listen to me. They don't always do that. But living in the mansion, in the governor's residence, it's wonderful. But in one of the rooms, you have this early 19th century French wallpaper. It's the dining room. It's very special. But our kids go running in there because they think it's a giant color by numbers. So it's funny. So you see this guy running in with a magic eraser after him, which we have found that it doesn't do any damage. It actually takes macaroni and cheese colored crayons off the walls. Very nice. But we've also learned, living in the governor's residence, which is wonderful, the nice rugs that they have on the ground. If you have a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old spill slime all over, it's okay. If you move quickly, it doesn't get embedded in there and never comes out. But when you come and visit Tallahassee, and we invite you all, and you take a tour, look around, because you will see slime and crayon marks, because it is our way of leaving our, quote, mark on the mansion after we leave.
I'm just glad the state of Florida didn't require us to post a security deposit before we moved in.
Trouble. You know what somebody was saying, real quick, I got to say this as we were walking down the hallway, because somebody came running over to me and they had something funny to say. They had the book in their hands, actually, and they had it open to the page, and they came over and they whispered something into my ear, and I thought it was kind of funny. They go, I was reading in the book, and they go, did you really get married at Disney? And I said, yes, it's true. It's true. And so people...
Was not my idea, just for the record. And this was the pre-woke era, too.
Pre-woke.
I didn't even know what woke was. But, yeah, it was interesting because, well, we had met. I was in the Navy in Naval Station Mayport. She was a TV reporter. And we actually met on a driving range hitting golf balls. I was in a bay hitting, then there was another bay in front of me that had balls left over, and then she was in the next one. And so I'm looking, I'm like, oh, beautiful lady, okay? And then she's kind of looking over her shoulder. I thought she was checking me out.
No.
In reality, she was looking to see whether I was going to take those abandoned bucket of balls.
Yes, that was gold on the driving range.
So we ended up using it to break the ice, and then we went out, and kind of the rest was history. So we're dating. I'm in the Navy at the time. I got sent to Coronado. I got assigned. I was the commander for SEAL Team 1's advisor. That when we went over to Iraq, so we were in like Fallujah, all these places. So basically I told myself, like, I just need to get through Iraq and then I'm gonna propose to her. So we did that, I got back, came back, redeploy, and then I proposed, and I told her for the wedding, I'm like, look, you do what you wanna do. I was like, I don't wanna be, to cramp it, like, I want you to be happy. If there's something that's like way out there, maybe I would exercise a little bit of oversight, but basically it's your day. And so, I was thinking just kind of like a normal wedding or whatever, and then she comes to me one day and says, hey, I got a question. I'm like, what? She's like, what do you think if we did the wedding at, and I'm like, where? She's like, Disney World. And I'm like, do they even have an ability? I didn't even know they did weddings there. And I basically just, and they actually have a very nice wedding chapel, all this other stuff. So they do it. And I said, look, if that's what you want, we'll do it. I just asked. I don't want Mickey or Donald Duck in our wedding party. And we didn't see, you wouldn't even know it was anything. It was basically a church. So it was really, really, really neat.
No, but it was funny. People ask me all the time, they would say, did you ever think that, you would be married to the governor of Florida? And I'm like, no. I mean, he was a cute guy in the Navy. I mean, I fell for the white uniform. It was a little bit like Tom Cruise.
And we never, doing the wedding, like just thinking back, like now thinking about it, like we wouldn't have in a million years thought that we'd end up, kind of in a face-off with this company.
No,
that really is like the most powerful company in the history of Florida. But what they had is, before I came, they operated their own government in Central Florida. So they have their own fiefdom, 44 square miles. They call the shots, no accountability, no oversight. And so, they had that for decades and decades. They got involved in our parents' rights and education with the gender ideology, opposing the bill, which that is fine. But I think that what they did was they then said, we are going to work to repeal parents' rights, and we're going to work to overturn parents' rights in court. Well, then we're in a situation where, and not me, this happened decades ago, but the state of Florida has gifted them their own government, living under a special set of rules, partially because they were viewed as the all-American company. But what do? They take that and they use it offensively against the state. So the state was, in effect, subsidizing woke activism. And I said, not on my watch. We got to go a different direction here. And so we said, they're not going to have their own government. And so we said we'd nix it. We nixed it. As the state was getting ready a month or two ago to take over the district, because there's things that got to be worked out. They have debt. We got to make sure they pay off all this stuff. They tried to do agreement with themselves, basically saying you're not allowed to touch any of this land or anything like that. And so we're in the process of nullifying that. It's not valid, and there's provisions of Florida law that let us do that. But it just shows you how arrogant that they were. We debated this issue in my election. Everyone knew this was a hot issue. A lot of the commentary class said that this was going to hurt me in Central Florida because they're Disney employees or whatever. And in reality, if you look at the county that has the most Disney employees, Osceola County, I'm the first Republican to have won that in many, many years. And we wanted, going away because... And a lot of people locally really supported because what they saw was the arrogance year after year that they were doing. They had like a fire department for the district, all this stuff. There's a woman whose husband was a firefighter, lost his life, and when Disney controlled this, they refused to pay survivor benefits to this. And I'm just thinking to myself, that's wrong. So there was, it just shows you human nature. When you have your own set of rules with no accountability and no oversight, you become more arrogant with it and more entitled. And so that's what happened. But it's an important principle. It's even beyond woke ideology. Like, yes, we fight the woke in the businesses, but it's The legislature decides no more self-government. I sign the bill. I campaign on the bill. We win a historic victory, and then we implement the bill, and they think they can just conduct a private agreement to get out of that? Who governs? I think we govern by we the people under the Constitution. I don't think there's an exception to that for woke companies based in Burbank, California. Just doesn't work that way.
No, and the underpinning of that, the parental rights in education, so the re-election the governor talked about, his first election, he won by 32,000 votes. Fast forward, won by 1.5 million. And a lot of those people who turned out were mamas and grandmamas. We had the largest coalition of moms and grandmoms across the state of Florida. We signed up 1.1 million. And one of the things they were fired up about was the parental rights in education. They did not think and did not want, whether it was Democrat, Independent, Republican, did not want woke ideology shoved down the throats of their 5-year-olds while they're in school. They said full stop that they didn't want it. And so they were very proud that the governor was standing up for that, for curriculum transparency. And you know, when I'm out and about, another thing people are very proud of, and I've been walking around in South Carolina all day, people are so proud of how you stood up and held the line during COVID, that you held in defense of their rights and liberties, especially when it wasn't popular.
You know, I don't think I've ever seen a wider violation of people's freedoms in this country than during COVID. You know, you had states that had forcibly shuttered churches, but yet had liquor stores and strip clubs open. You know, you had states doing things, and even the federal government trying to force people out of their jobs if they refused to take an mRNA shot, which wasn't even a fully approved. It was emergency use. And they were trying to get people to lose their job over that. And not only that, by the time they did the mandates in the fall of 2021, it was obvious that the shots weren't even working to prevent you from getting infected. People were getting infected. It was ridiculous that they refused to see. It was almost like as more people got infected, as what they claimed would do didn't happen, they got even more coercive to try to do that. So in Florida, we did, we banned any COVID shot mandates for school children. We banned vaccine passports, and we said nobody in the employment context has to choose between a job they need and a shot they don't want. We protected them in the workplace, and I think that that's important. But the danger of it is, it was clear after relatively early on that what they were selling, they were not trying to protect your health. They were trying to control you. They wanted to use power over your behavior, and they wanted you to behave the way they wanted you to, not the way you chose to. And that's very, very dangerous. And I think people like Fauci, were very destructive bureaucrats, and they did a lot of damage to this country with all this nonsense. And we can never let that happen to this country ever again. Casey and I, so we've got 6'5", girl, boy, girl. So we've got two daughters. They're both very talented, a lot of stuff, both very, very athletic. And, we had to fight this issue in Florida on preserving women's athletics. I mean, just think about it. You have a swimmer, like in Pennsylvania, swims on the men's team for 3 years, then switches to the women's team and wins the national championship in the 500-yard. And there was a second-place finisher, actually it was from Sarasota in Florida, who should have been the women's champion. I actually did a proclamation from the governor's office, and we at the state of Florida recognized her, the quote, second-place finisher from Sarasota. We recognized her as the fastest woman swimmer in the 500 yards, because that's the truth. But so we look at it, I think, from a perspective, we want opportunities for our kids. Everyone wants that. And if you have a daughter that wants to compete in sports, to allow like a male athlete to just interfere with that is just fundamentally wrong. And the same people that claim they're for women's rights are the ones that are trying to shoehorn men into women's athletics. Give me a break. That is wrong. But So it goes beyond that now, and we've had to do this, and it's sad that you have to do it. We had to do on our medical board a prohibition on doing sex change operations for minors. They're trying to do puberty blockers to, quote, change someone's gender. So they'll do puberty blockers when they're 13. They give young girls, age 15, 16, double mastectomies to try to change. And what ends up happening is a lot of the people that get older, they regret this. It's like a huge problem. We've had people offer very powerful testimony. So basically in Florida, what we said, if physicians do that, they lose their medical license in our state. And there's been damage done, of course, but then you have this larger issue of when even things like medicine are becoming infected with woke, because it is not evidence-based medicine to take somebody's private parts off who's 15 years old. It's not, and nobody who does it right thinks that. This is ideology and a social agenda that is infecting the practice of medicine. So Florida got it right to say you're going to lose your license here. In our state, we're also working through the legislature to have even tougher penalties on it. But who would have thought even 10 years ago, that we would be in a situation like we're doing now? So I do think fundamentally woke represents a war on truth. And if you have a society that's not based on the truth, if it's based on whatever ideological currents may be blowing in the wind, that is not a society that's moored to anything enduring. That's not a society that's going to be successful. You've got to be grounded in the truth. And it's not your truth or my truth. There is an actual truth that we need to have guide our affairs.
And I've had people come up to me all day long, not only here, we were in Ohio a couple of days ago, and they're so proud because Florida is really leading the way. And because we're in the legislative session and all of this good stuff is coming out, it's actually starting a national dialogue and a discourse, and you're seeing other legislatures across the country starting to enact policies that people say are just common sense. And that's just good leadership. And like you said, it hits home for us when I think about the women in athletics. So, again, we have our 6-year-old and our 3-year-old. By the way, the 3-year-old, she plays sports, but she doesn't really play sports. Okay, so she has a great swing at T-ball, but then she takes off to third base, and we're like, trying to rally. And then, by the second inning, she's building sandcastles in the dirt, and it is what it is. But, we would not be sitting here if it weren't for sports. For me in particular, I was track, cross country, basketball, soccer. I went to the College of Charleston, was on the equestrian team, but we met on the golf course. All athletics really brought us together. And so when I see these women, and I've had a chance to talk to a lot of them who have put all of this years of hard work, blood, sweat, toil, and tears into their craft, getting up every morning, and then to be snuffed out at the end, the chance to win a national championship, it's just not fair. That's not fair. And I think the majority of the people across this country would agree with that.
Well, I think we have some books. I'm going to come and I'm going to sign some books, and we'll visit with you all in a second. But I think at the end of the day, for this American experiment to survive, we need to see a revival of true fundamental American principles. Our country's unique. These principles endure. And they're as applicable today as they were in 1776 or 1787. And we need to be embracing the founding creed of this country, that our rights are not a courtesy of the state, but they are a gift of Almighty God. That's how we were founded. And that's how we have to govern our affairs. And so, the thing about it is, we titled the book "Courage to be Free," and the reason why I did that is not necessarily that I'm anything special, but it's just in this day and age, if you're standing up for what's right, there's going to be a cost to that. And it could be a guy like me as governor. Anytime I roll out of bed, the left has a spasm and the media has a spasm. That's just the nature of it, right? But it also means, somebody can be out leafleting for a candidate. You could be accosted by some angry leftist. You go to a school board meeting and speak out as a concerned parent. If you're not towing the ideological line, you'll get smeared by a legacy media outlet. And so there's ought to be a cost to standing up for what's right, but you know, there have been a lot of more people that have given a lot more than what we're required to do. You know, when I was going to Washington, D.C., you're able to fly into Reagan Airport, and you can actually see all the great vistas on our National Mall and the Lincoln Memorial and Washington and the Capitol building. And it's like, man, you know, these are really powerful symbols of what our country's all about. But the best monuments in the D.C. area are not on the National Mall. It's not the Capitol building. You got to go over the Potomac, and you got to go to the rolling hills of Arlington National Cemetery. And those headstones for those people, many of whom gave the last full measure of devotion for this country, and you could have the best monuments, you could have the best leaders, political leaders, you can have the best political ideas, but if you don't have people that are willing to give it all in defense of a free society, then it ain't gonna last for very much longer. Fortunately, we're not called upon what we're doing to make that type of a sacrifice. Some have been, of course. All we're called upon to do is just hold the line, stand firm, and don't back down to the left or any of these people. So thank you all. God bless.
Governor.